There is no classically trained sculptor in the world today. There hasn't been in over 100 years since the Beaux-Arts closed its classical program down since about the time of Duchamp and World War I. We had a few ragtag remaining sculptors up until probably the last living from that period being living in the 1980s. But to be classically trained is not to be realistic. There's a vast movement out there that the better you know anatomy, the more classical you are. And that just ain't the case. Classical is a complete education, is scholarship. Knowledge of the Greek, the Latin, this day and age perhaps Sanskrit and Prakrit, Pali, even Hawaiian. To be original means going to the origin. It doesn't mean being outlandish. The classicals started with arrangement, and our art movement has moved into derangement. And perhaps the best artists, most capable and skilled, have gone into the movie industry because that is where it pays. And if I were smarter, I would have possibly gotten into that if I was capable of doing so. I might just have been too cantankerous to have anybody ever desire to have me around in their studio. I'm a bit of a troublemaker. I want to speak today about a few artists that I consider real sculptors and closer to being classically trained. First of all, the term sculptor means to cut. And there's a misnomer out there that if you're doing clay modeling, you're doing sculpture. You're not. You're doing clay modeling, and that's all it is. You can subtract and you can add endlessly. With sculpture, there's a deftness, a definiteness. There's a preciseness that you need. Now, I'm not talking about those who use a machinetta, because to me that's just what would you call it? Making copies. That's just copying, making reproductions. To use a machinetta to a point, but you've got to allow to change the decisions. If you look at Michelangelo's sculptures, you can see where he has drawn in, created the outline, cuts in, and then he actually starts to change the drawing right within the marble. So he sets the drawing in, and then cuts in, and then he can push it back and bring it, can't bring it forward, but push it back and leave an area and push it back more, or push it. It's more of a process of more or less. But if you look, he's actually changed the lines on many of the unfinished sculptures that you see. You can see where he has started a leg or an arm and then moved its position. That's called direct carving. And so today I'm going to talk about the artists that I know who I respect because they do direct carving, which is to not use the machinetta. I think it's okay to use the machinetta to a point, but sometimes the stone will show you a flaw, and that flaw has been there for eons, and it will show you what you're made of. It will make your decision for you. Decide literally means to cut off. The first sculptor who I just YouTubed has about 25 views, and I consider him probably one of the most competent sculptors in the world today, and absolutely more beautiful and to be honest, more classically trained than the artists who have the anatomy down extremely well. There's a knowledge of the line and beauty and form. And what we've lost in this country, and I've seen it, is you have to be told what's good. And I never see anybody on any of these performances like The Voice or those other programs like The Voice where they perform. They don't have to tell the audience that it's good. The audience knows it's good. And if a person's art, sculpture is good, the audience will know it's good. You'll know it's good by, Vasari called it grazia, a sense of grace that overwhelms the viewer. It grabs you by the heart. And I know that there's a few artists out there that their work just grabs me. And it seems to me that the more words you have to use, the less the art is. It's not art. Art's its own language, and if you have to use words to defend it, then you're just copying. Copying into the old educational bullshit that says that the professor said it's true, and so you say it's true, and so you just verify by creating these footnotes and references to everything you know, and just layer upon bullshit where knowledge isn't to be an author is to be the authentic and go to the source. But to be an author today, you have to have footnotes upon footnotes and be approved by your professors and your dean and get their pat on your head by them so that you're approved. So what we've ended up with is not much. There is the Atelier movement. You've got Daniel Graves and the Florence Academy, great for painting and drawing. And you got the girl up in Seattle area, really beautiful for painting and drawing. And you got a guy in Florence, Italy, who's anyway, he's very good at talking about this, much more so than me. He runs a lot of workshops. But I think that the artists that I think are worth looking at, one is Giovanni Ball-Bearing. His work is magnificent. It's sensual without showing much of the figure. It's erotic. The other is Elena Mutinelli. She's out of Milan. She's just a little thing. And she handles these big, huge hammers and has a lot of authority in her work. And I've seen her speak, and she's extremely passionate about what she speaks about. I've had people ask me things, so I just trying to answer some of these things so that they're kind of spread out, because I have some videos that have 25 views and I have some that have 30,000. So I've seen a lot of really young talent that is really good. I mean, far better than my generation. I'd like to see them take the ball and run. The skill of the sculptor is more closely associated with that of the architect than that of the painter. And if you understand that, then you can look at a composition and see the foolishness of some of these long, lanky, spread out, winged things that you could only do in bronze. By working in stone, it'll teach you what sculpture is all about. It'll teach you composition, the whys and wherefores, where the actual working in stone will subordinate years of academic reasoning. The first thing I think it's important to recognize with I think since we're going to associate sculpture with architecture, we need to be able to be versed in Vitruvius, because he's the first one to write the 10 books of architecture and apply the principles of architecture. And I believe a lot of those principles are true for sculpture as well. So I'll speak on some of these principles. First, I think we need to talk about the Vitruvian Triad: Firmitas, Utilitas, and Venustas. Firmitas is firmness, structurally sound, firm, durable, strength. Consistency, stability, and endurance. And again, I think the best people to look at for this, first of all, would be the primary sculptors. First of all, would be Michelangelo. Look at the way he'll put a hand forward. You don't see a lot of this. You may see a little more of this, but the firmness of the grip, so that it can be carved in stone and be durable. Michelangelo said that a sculpture should be able to be rolled down the hill and not lose a limb. The second one is Utilitas: practical, useful, expedient, and function. And I think where we get the utility in sculpture is the allegory. And that's where the classical education comes in. To not be fatuous, but to have a strength of character behind your work that has come through because of the trials of life and understanding. That's the utility. That's what the sculptor is offering. It's not just a nude figure reclining. Rather, it might be Psyche's last breath, or reviving breath. And what is the allegory behind it? Start searching for the myth and how that can relate to you in these times. And then, of course, Venustas, which is beauty. And if it isn't beautiful, it's not going to appeal to anybody. It's not going to appeal to you, and you're not going to be interested. Nobody's going to be interested in it. It seems that in the ancient Greek society, and even in the Oriental society, beauty is virtuous. And we seem to have lost a connection with the virtuousness of something as beautiful. Let's see if I'm missing any part. Utilitas also has to deal with arrangement. With conjecture and logic, and by comparison, buildings and usefulness would be how the spaces are arranged in respect to one another. Therefore, arrangement should be considered useful to the eye and tell the viewer the story. The intellectual understanding elevates the viewer to a greater understanding of oneself. Beauty is not only an option, it is a necessity. the classical ideal of beauty should be a source of pride and show the power of who you are in the world. Beauty gives substance to the shared humanity. We should see beauty as a source of virtue. And Victor Hugo said, a woman in the flesh must look like marble, and a statue of marble must look like flesh. And we have to worry about too much, to be too realistic can become a sort of waxworks. First would be the fundamental principles of sculptural order are arrangement, that is putting things into their proper places, original, going to the origin, naturalistic, idealistic, allegoric, symmetrical harmony, agreement with the proportions of the whole, propriety, fitness to the sculpture and where it's going to go in its proper location, and economy. You've got to get the thing done. That's got to be done in a timely manner. I can speak further on these later. I just saw this note I want to read. A clear idea, therefore, is the name of a little idea. This is according to Edmund Burke. Edmund Burke said, the passion caused by the great sublime in nature, when those causes operate most powerfully, is astonishment. And astonishment is that state of the soul which all of its motions are suspended with some degree of horror. In this case, the mind is so entirely filled with its object that it cannot entertain any other, nor by consequence reason any other object that employs it. Hence arises the great power of the sublime, that, far from being produced by them, it anticipates our reasonings and hurries us on by an irresistible force. Astonishment, as I have said, it is the effect of the sublime in its highest degree. The inferior effects for admiration, reverence, and respect. That's from the philosophical inquiry into the sublime and the beautiful by Edmund Burke. A great work of art leads to astonishment, a sort of terror. Terror of how inferior my artwork could be, and how much more we could do. Being on a mountaintop and seeing it's absolutely beautiful, but you could fall from it.